Lamar Jackson, 2 straight MVPs. Voters are getting tired of him winning the award. And you said it. How are you going to not vote him MVP when he has 40 touchdown passes, leads the league in passer rating, and he's a dual threat quarterback, can beat you with his arms and his legs, and he's having a better statistical season than his MVP years?
Welcome to the NFL on Fox podcast, presented by Verizon, the NFL powered by Verizon 5G. I am your host, Dave Helman, and as promised, an early Christmas present for you. We are hitting the feed early this week. Whether you're hearing this on Christmas Eve, Christmas Day, the day after, it's up to you. Either way, we hope you are enjoying a healthy, happy, productive holiday season, holiday week, spending time with family and friends, still finding time to dive in to this Week 17 preview episode. We appreciate your dedication here at the NFL on Fox podcast, and we've got you covered. It is the reason for the season. Playoff implications galore. So many great matchups this week, and they start early. That's why we had to hop in your feed early when there's 2 major Christmas games with huge playoff implications. So much to talk about there. We've got a Saturday triple header that we're taking an in-depth look at because those games are all loaded with playoff scenarios. And of course, your regular Sunday slate, even a Monday night preview, a rerun of last year's NFC Championship game, Lions 49ers. It's a lot to look forward to. It's a lot to break down. We don't have any time to waste. We know you're busy this week. Let's dive in. All right, as per usual, on a loaded Week 17, we're going to spend the top of the show breaking down the biggest matchups of the week, and we're not going to have to wait long for some of these because we've got Christmas Day football, as we've been alluding to. 2 games on Netflix, the Chiefs going to Pittsburgh to face the Steelers and the Ravens facing the Houston Texans. That's where we're going to start it off. But as per usual, I'm going to get a big assist. I'm excited today. I am joined by a friend and colleague, national NFL reporter for USA Today, Tyler Dragon, and a former partner on the Cowboys beat with me. Go figure. We crossed paths in Dallas, and now we're doing NFL podcasts out in LA. How are you, Tyler?
Doing good. Happy holidays to you.
Yeah, I do appreciate. Look, typically you can like catch your breath over Christmas and prep for the weekend, but with these Christmas games, we're here recording early. No days off in the NFL. I deeply appreciate the way we've managed to find football on. I think like Tuesday's the last bastion because they got Black Friday now.
Right.
We got the Wednesday Christmas games. As much as you might like, you've got to load that much more into the early part of the week, but I'm really looking forward to having live football on Wednesday. I can't wait. Let's start with the Chiefs at the Steelers. Kansas City can lock up home field advantage with a win. They're road favorites. I think like every year around this time, and it's happening again. People are mad at the Chiefs because of the officiating. People are mad at the Chiefs because the wins are not impressive enough. People are mad at the Chiefs because they're not high enough in the power rankings. Nobody respects the 2-time defending champions. They are 2-point road favorites against a 10-win team. So spare me with this talk that we're not respecting the Kansas City Chiefs. I think we all have a healthy appreciation for what the Chiefs are capable of.
They find ways to win, and that's a testament to all 3 phases, what they do on offense, defense, and special teams. And I mean, the way that Patrick Mahomes has been able to play with a new cast of receivers, his best receiver, Rashee Rice, goes down at the beginning portion of the season. He gets chemistry and develops with, a Hollywood Brown later on in the season and so on. We always know what Travis Kelce does. I mean, I just admire the way that he's able to lift his team and will his team to win. And then also defensively. Defensively is what's carrying the Chiefs as well as Patrick Mahomes and his mastery. I mean, Chris Jones, he doesn't have the sack numbers as he does in years past.
He's got everything else,
yes.
though.
Yeah, exactly. The defense centers around him and what he's able to do at the interior. And so the Chiefs, I just did my Super Bowl predictions for USA Today this week, And at the beginning of the season,
Are these public?
yeah, these are public.
Okay.
At the beginning of the season, I had the Ravens to win the Super Bowl. I have to admit, I switched my pick to the Chiefs. After I saw what Hollywood Brown does to the Chiefs offense, you have Xavier Worthy. They can both take the top off of the defense. Then you have old reliable DeAndre Hopkins. He's already turned in to Patrick Mahomes' number one target at wide receiver. I have the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl. Third straight NFL record.
It's funny because I picked the Chiefs before the season, and like you get so tempted to ride with somebody else because, I mean, Lamar's playing incredible. We'll get to him in this Ravens-Texans game in a minute. Josh Allen's doing his thing. Like it's easy to get enamored with all of these other teams, but there are the Chiefs, man. And you set it up so perfectly because I think people every year we forget that football teams evolve over the course of time, and it's terrifying to think that they're good enough to be 14-1.
Right.
Last week was Hollywood's first game back. Not like he didn't set the world on fire, but he was active and a reliable piece of the offense. I thought Xavier Worthy played one of his best games as a pro against Houston. You already mentioned the defense. So now, and by the way, like I said, you can lock up the 1 seed if you beat Pittsburgh.
Right.
So you can be judicious about doing whatever you want next week. You do not have to give a damn about the Broncos if you don't want to. And you get the bye week. So that's useful time if Pat needs to rest his ankle, if Travis Kelce needs to get a blow, Chris Jones is dealing with an injury. I want to touch on that in a minute as well. So you get all these pieces back in the final month of the season. Throw Isaiah Pacheco in there as well because he's only been back since Black Friday. Give him a couple weeks to rest. And would you really be surprised if the Chiefs just don't tear through the playoffs?
I would not. I mean, it's going to be tough to go in and at Arrowhead Stadium and beat them. And I mean, maybe the Bills can do it, but you know, the Bills have been inconsistent. I was there when they lost to the Los Angeles Rams in the shootout.
Sure.
Can that defense stop the Chiefs on third down? That's why the Chiefs are so good. They stay on the field. They're the best third down offense in the entire National Football League. So can they go in? I have my doubts. Can the Ravens? We've already seen the Ravens struggle against the Chiefs this season, last season, season before this. So, I mean, there's not really any team in the AFC I can confidently say can go up in Arrowhead Stadium and beat Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid and company.
One thing I'd be curious to see, and I don't know if we will. Chris Jones, I just mentioned it. He's dealing with a calf injury. He upgraded to limited, obviously. Yeah. I love these guesstimations at this time of year because the Chiefs played Saturday and they're traveling now. Like they didn't have a real practice. No. So these are all guesses, but Chris Jones upgraded to limited on the last practice report. I'm going to guess that he plays. But what would the Chiefs look like without Chris Jones? I would be curious to see because he's only missed one game in the last 3 years, and it was the season opener that they lost to Detroit when he was waiting on a new contract. I think it would make a huge, huge difference if he weren't able to play. Maybe we don't see that, but part of me is curious of like, how much is Chris Jones really lifting? I mean, we know he's doing a lot, but what would that Chiefs defense look like if he weren't able to go?
What Aaron Donald was to the Rams during that Super Bowl run is what Chris Jones is to the Kansas City Chiefs. The whole defense centers around his ability to create pressure up the middle. And he switches along that defensive line. There are some plays where he plays defensive end. There are some plays where he plays that 3 technique or defensive tackle. So, you know, without Chris Jones in the lineup, that'll be a huge blow. But what I'm hearing is not a serious injury. He'll probably end up playing in Christmas. And if they win, I'll see them probably rest against Denver. Patrick Mahomes, a Chris Jones, you know, George Karlaftis. There'll be a lot of starters resting on that Week 18 game if they win in Pittsburgh.
I'm going to say all the more reason to win, and then these guys can all get several weeks to put their feet up. On the Steelers side of this, I'm a lot more intrigued now that I know George Pickens is going to play. Like while we were getting ready to record this, the Steelers took George Pickens off of their injury report. So he's good to go with that hamstring injury. Tyler, Russell Wilson's yards per attempt. He was up close to 9 in the first 6 weeks of the season. It's been barely 6 in this time without George Pickens. I mean, I know Calvin Austin, I said it earlier this week, like he's had some moments
Mhm.
for the Steelers, but I feel comfortable saying Pittsburgh doesn't have a chance against Kansas City without some semblance of a downfield passing game. So I'm a lot more excited about this game knowing that George Pickens should be out there. A, because of what he can do as a player,
Mhm.
and B, because of what he might get involved in against Steve Spagnuolo's defense
Yeah.
after the whistle, if you will.
Yeah, I agree with you there. However, the Chiefs have Trent McDuffie to kind of shadow him. And really for Pittsburgh, is who's going to be that number 2 pass catching threat? George Firemove, yes, he's a good player, tight end, but I'm looking for a player like Mike Williams. They traded for him, and he's been kind of absent throughout since he's gotten to Pittsburgh.
He won the game against Washington
Yeah.
for them, and it's not been a whole lot ever since.
Exactly. So they expect more out of him. He's a former 1,000-yard receiver for the LA Chargers. So can he be that bona fide number 2 threat on the opposite side of George Pickens? Because they're going to need that, especially when they get into the postseason and go up against these upper echelon teams.
I completely expect the Chiefs to do their Chiefs thing. Like, this won't be a runaway, but I've seen them do this enough times to expect them to win this game by 3 to 10 points and claim the number 1 seed and sort of end the drama. Although I don't root for teams, right? But the AFC becomes a lot more interesting if Pittsburgh manages to pull this off.
Oh, 100%, because then they'll probably win the AFC North. The Chiefs have to play Week 18 because they still want that number 1 seed. The Broncos, if they lose to the Bengals, they pretty much have to win Week 18. So, yeah, the whole thing goes. Week 18 becomes a lot more interesting if the Chiefs so happen to lose. I just don't think they will lose.
No, I don't think so either. But we can we got to at least outline the possibility.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I'm
yeah.
guessing.
Pray for chaos.
15-1, I'm guessing, by Christmas night, Kansas City Chiefs. Let's talk about the late game on Netflix, the Baltimore Ravens and the Houston Texans. We talked about this with Peter Schrager last week. It's a great gamble by the NFL, really, to pick these 4 teams, because if you're going to play on Wednesday on Christmas, you gotta. They made them all play on Saturday, and it worked out so beautifully that all these teams avoided catastrophic injury. They're all in the thick of the playoff race. It might have been a brutal scenario if one or both of these games was rough, and it hasn't worked out that way at all. This is another great one. Houston reeling a little bit, but ironically has one of the safest playoff situations of anybody in the AFC. They're going to be the 4 seed. Like they've known that for a week at this point. I'm curious to see how the Ravens handle success. Like you just said, consistency has been their biggest problem. They get a big win against Pittsburgh. How do they respond to it on the road?
Well, this is my favorite game of the day for what's happening on the field and at halftime, I have to admit.
We do have to mention Beyonce, which
yes.
Shout out to Lamar Jackson, because in this era of everybody's got to be so serious, everybody's got to be focused on, nothing but winning is important. For the best player in football, or one of them anyway, to say, I'm going to go watch Beyonce at halftime. Thank you so much for Lamar Jackson for reminding us that this can still be fun.
Of course. Beyonce at halftime. But yeah, what's happening on the field? I mean, Lamar Jackson, he's my MVP. I saw what Josh Allen did last week, and it was neck and neck, in my opinion. It's hard to deny what Lamar Jackson's doing. Yes, I know Derrick Henry gets a lot of the credit, and he gets a lot of the rushing yards, one of the league leaders in rushing. But Lamar Jackson leads the league in passer rating. The Ravens have the number 1 offense in the NFL. And when they're clicking, their offense is just beautiful to watch. And Lamar Jackson has been unstoppable of late. So when I look up that matchup against the Houston Texans, the Texans, they have a good defense, but they give up a lot of big plays, and they're dealing with that emotional injury to Tank Dell. And how are you going to respond to that? We saw the unfortunate incident, players emotional on the field, CJ Stroud, and a lot of visibly emotional. But them in Houston, I just don't see that happening because they lack consistency, and that pass offense without a number 2 receiver like a Tank Dell. I know they just got Dante Johnson, but he's been MIA as well. So
not only has he been MIA, I mean, he caught one pass for 6 yards the entirety of his Ravens tenure. He also just got to Houston on Monday night. I don't see Deontay Johnson factoring heavily in this game. If anything, I'm rooting like hell for John Mechie to take this opportunity. He was inactive on Saturday. Sounds like he's going to play here. Him and Robert Woods behind Nico Collins are Houston's best bets, but really fun young player. He's had some moments.
You're right.
It hasn't really broken out for him to this point, but man, this would be a hell of an opportunity.
It would be. You just can't. He's unpredictable. He was unpredictable. It has been his entire career. And for them to beat the Ravens when the Ravens are playing at a high level, I just don't see it happening. And Derrick Henry, man, I love when they run the read option with him and Lamar Jackson. That's turning into one of the most unstoppable plays in football right now. The only question I have with the Ravens is that pass defense. They have the worst pass defense in the NFL. The Jamar Chase, I feel like, is still catching passes on the Ravens. And they have the sack numbers, but they don't rush the passer consistently enough to my liking. That defense is their Achilles heel, and that can keep them, out of not making the AFC Championship game or not making the Super Bowl. And that's why I picked the Chiefs to win the Super Bowl, because that Ravens pass defense is suspect to me.
It was very encouraging to see them make game-winning plays against the Steelers, but you're absolutely right, and I'd love to see it again on a more consistent basis. Real quick, I want to hit what you said, because I have felt like a crazy person the last 2 weeks. Full disclosure, Josh Allen's probably my favorite player to watch in the NFL, just because it's like if a water buffalo had a cannon for an arm. He's a singular player. And I was big on the Bills before the season. All of that said, I feel like a crazy person because I get on here every week and I say, hang on. Josh Allen should not have locked up the MVP yet. That should not be the narrative at this point in the season. Lamar Jackson, very quietly, has set a career high for touchdown passes, which is remarkable since when he won the MVP the first time, he had 36. So he's on 37 with 2 games to go. Add in his 3 rushing touchdowns. His career high from 2019 is 43. He could top that. I doubt he gets all the way to 50 in 2 more games, but he could get to 45, 46 touchdowns. You mention it. Not only is he leading the league in passer rating, he's got a shot to set the single season passer rating record. He's at 120.6. The only guys that have ever been better over a full season are Aaron Rodgers, 2 of the years he won MVP, and Peyton Manning, a year that he won MVP. Statistically, this is absolutely incredible. And I think it's weird that people are just writing this off as a real storyline. And my guess is that it's about wins. It comes down so much to that for quarterbacks. But I would just like to point out, I don't think Lamar can pass Buffalo for the number 2 seed in the AFC just because Buffalo's got 2 games on them. But if this goes the way I think it will, I think the Ravens win the AFC North eventually. I think the Steelers lose to the Chiefs. The Ravens win these next 2 games. They get the 3 seed. You really mean to tell me that Baltimore at the 3 seed with 12 wins, with a Lamar Jackson who's setting passer rating records and scoring 45 touchdowns, that's not worthy of another MVP?
So Lamar Jackson is getting the LeBron James and Michael Jordan treatment. When they won the MVP, it's voter fatigue. Lamar Jackson, 2 straight MVPs. Voters are getting tired of him winning the award. And you said it. How are you going to not vote him MVP when he has 40 touchdown passes, leads the league in passer rating, and he's a dual threat quarterback, can beat you with his arms and his legs, and he's having a better statistical season than his MVP years? So
far and away better than last year. How are you
not going to vote him MVP? And I just think it's voter fatigue. People want storylines. Josh Allen's lost his number 1 receiver. Buffalo, they kind of revamped their defense. And overall, the Buffalo Bills have surprised a lot of teams. I picked the Bills to finish 3rd in the AFC East at the beginning of the season because I thought they were going to take a step back with the revamped defense with Stephon Diggs no longer there. But Josh Allen, to his credit, he's carried the team. He's lessened his interceptions, not turned the ball over at a high rate, and he's led that team to what looks like the number 2 seed in the AFC. So you have to give credit where credit is due. But on the field, the eye test, he is not having a better season than Lamar Jackson.
If Josh winds up winning MVP, but Buffalo wins 12 plus games.
Mm-hmm.
They're the number 2 seed in the AFC. Josh scores 40 touchdowns. And I think the preseason narrative of them taking a step back is important. I think he would be a worthy winner.
Mm-hmm.
I won't be like upset that some injustice was carried out if Josh Allen wins, but it does not sit well with me that 2 weeks out from the end of the season, it seems like a lot of people have already settled this in their minds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's right at all.
Yeah, I hate to agree with you so much, Dave, but I guess in the Christmas spirit, I will. But again, it's that voter fatigue. LeBron James felt it in the NBA. Michael Jordan did. Not to compare him to those caliber of players, but when you win an MVP so much, and a lot of times it is a narrative award. What do you do during the course of the season? Do you have these MVP type moments? And with Lamar Jackson, okay, we've seen this before. We know that you're dominant. We know that you make game-changing plays. Voters get bored of voting for the same player over and over again for the MVP.
I think you're right. I also think voters are easily swayed by what happens in big national moments.
Mm-hmm.
I think the San Francisco-Baltimore game from Christmas last year is a great example.
Oh, yeah.
Did a huge amount to sway people in favor of the Ravens and of Lamar Jackson. So maybe Christmas night, something similar could happen.
This is true.
If Lamar goes off in this game, I think people will start to say, hey, hang on a second. The season's not all the way over just yet.
If he goes off and watches Beyonce at halftime, guarantee.
Lamar Jackson dancing to Beyonce in between putting up MVP stats. Yeah, that would be
unanimous.
He would have. Unfortunately, I do not have a vote, but he would have my vote. All right, let's throw it to Sunday. Early window right here on Fox. Team that you and I are both very familiar with, the Dallas Cowboys going up to Philadelphia.
Mm-hmm.
It's got to sting Jerry Jones ever so slightly that this game was flexed out of the 3:30, 4:30 window into the 10 a.m. noon slot. Still, there's plenty on the line here. I mean, Mike McCarthy potentially coaching for his job. It's kind of starting to feel like he's going to have a chance to stay on as the Cowboys head coach. And obviously, the Eagles can clinch the NFC East with a win. Definitely still a big game, but like I was saying about taking gambles, probably not the Cowboys-Eagles game that people were hoping for when this one showed up on the schedule.
Yeah, so Mike McCarthy, I do believe he's going to keep his job. The Cowboys
it's starting to feel that way, right?
Yeah, they play well of late. 4 of the last 5 games, they really should have beat the Bengals without that boneheaded special teams play. So, yeah, you have to give him credit for the Cowboys are playing with pride down the stretch and still playing for their jobs, and you have to give them credit for that. The Eagles, though, it all is contingent upon Jalen Hurts' health. He's in concussion protocol. Is he going to be able to play? I have my doubts that he plays this weekend. But if he does play, let's be honest, the Eagles are going to win this game. It's no match. The Cowboys, especially without Dak Prescott, Cooper Rush has been erratic throwing the football. And the Cowboys, yes, Rico Dowdle's been decent, but they really don't have a starting caliber running back. So can that defense make a play at Micah Parsons? Can they make some interceptions? Or can CeeDee Lamb have game-changing plays? And I don't think the Eagles are going to let two players really beat them that the Cowboys have that are game changers. It's just a question to me, is Jalen Hurts healthy enough to play? He has to have that, step process to pass the concussion protocol. But really, though, Saquon Barkley, is he going to surpass 2,000 rushing yards and break Eric Dickerson's record? He has the outside chance to break it.
It kind of feels like he's lost it here through no fault of his own. I mean, he's been dealing with a knee injury. I mean, he's at 1,800.
Mm-hmm.
He would have to absolutely go off here over the next 2 weeks.
Can, though. Dallas can't stop the run.
He can, and they get the Giants to wrap up the season. With the fact that he's dealing with an injury, Kenny Gainwell's played well of late. I've said this before on other shows. I'm a fan of history. I would love to see it. It would be really cool to see somebody set such a famous record.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I'd even give him the chance if I were the Eagles, because I'm trying to keep him fresh for the playoffs. I want him, if we can get Kenny Gainwell in there,
Mm-hmm.
maybe even get Will Shipley some work. Like, Saquon Barkley feeling good in January is more important to me than Eric Dickerson's record.
That's true, but what if he breaks off a long one at the very beginning of the game and has
He's got
100
82 at the end of the first quarter.
And then the Giants, you want to stick it to the Giants one more time just for good measure at the end of the year. But I do see what you're saying. That Eagles team, though, I think it's important for them to end the season strong, especially with 2 wins, considering how they finished last year and kind of fell off a cliff. So I do play my starters just to make sure I finish the season strong and get a couple wins and go into the playoffs on a high note.
I'm just going to take a sec to defend my man Rico's honor here, because Rico Dowdle has a great shot to finish with 1,000 rushing yards, which I don't know how he wasn't the unquestioned lead back in Dallas.
Mm-hmm.
He's certainly not a top tier running back. I think the Cowboys will look for maybe not a replacement, but they will add to that running back room in the offseason.
Yeah.
But Rico Dowdle should have been getting the workload that he's been getting for the last month all along, and I will take every opportunity I can to remind the Cowboys front office of that. Going back to your point, I said this about Patrick Mahomes last week with the ankle, and it blew up in my face. Obviously, he was fantastic. Regardless of the concussion protocol, and maybe you go through the protocol, I get it. It's not like an ankle injury where you test it out and stuff like that. But even if Jalen Hurts is feeling good, it makes sense to me if this is a situation where you sit him anyway, because you have it in your back pocket that you get to play the New York Giants at the end of the year. And I know it's the NFL, and I know every game is tough, but you give Jalen an extra week to rest, you get a home game against the New York Giants team that was looking at flights to Turks and Caicos 2 weeks ago. I think they'll be fine in the long run. And on top of that, I think Kenny Pickett, as up and down as he was against Washington, I think you could win this game with Kenny Pickett as well. I'm totally fine giving Jalen an extra week.
Can you win with Kenny Pickett? Are you sure about that?
I think it's much harder, but I think it's doable. Yes. They played well enough to win this most recent game. I mean, Devontae Smith catches an easy third down, then Kenny Pickett gets that win. I'm not saying he played great, but they should have won that game.
I don't think you can win with Kenny Pickett. I do agree he did play decent in that Washington game. However, I just have Kenny Pickett syndrome from watching him in Pittsburgh. It just was a disaster. But with the Eagles, though, like I said, I think it's paramount for them to finish the season strong, considering that they nosedive last year. Now, you have to protect Jalen Hurts, and you want to go into the postseason healthy, and they're not going to get the number 1 seed. This like a long shot,
2% chance. I think.
So if they do rest and take the L, which will probably happen, I can understand that, but you have to at least play your starters 3 quarters in that final game. They need a win to go into postseason on a high note.
They are 9.5-point favorites, despite the uncertainty at quarterback. So
that's the state of the Cowboys right now.
It absolutely is. Like I said, I'm sure this is not how Jerry Jones expected Christmas week to be playing out for his team. Way more interested than I thought I would be, though, just because I think I said this earlier in the week. I never would have guessed Mike McCarthy's status would still be up in the air. It felt like a done deal around Thanksgiving. Not so fast. We'll see.
I'm pretty sure he keeps his job now. The way that they have finished 1-4 the last 5 games, been competitive. It hasn't been blowouts. You don't get the sense that players have quit on him. All that matters. And all that's going to factor into Jerry Jones' decision.
2 years of Mike McCarthy's tenure, he's lost Dak Prescott halfway through the season. And both of those years, they've made a run in the second half of the season. I do think stuff like that matters. 3 straight 12-win seasons. It's always going to be about what you do in the playoffs with the Cowboys, which is why so many people are down on Mike McCarthy. But in a vacuum, when you consider that or if you don't consider, that this is the most polarizing team in the league with a 30-year championship drought, it makes perfect sense if they want to bring him back in a vacuum. It's only when you add the star into the mix that this becomes a much different conversation. We'll see how it goes. Let's wrap this up. The Sunday night game flexed into Sunday night, and rightfully so. This is still a good game if Kirk Cousins is the quarterback. Even with his struggles, this is still an interesting game. But man, all of a sudden, it's a Heisman Trophy showcase.
Right.
It was a year ago, basically, maybe a year and some weeks. Jayden Daniels beat out Michael Penix Jr. for the Heisman Trophy, and now here they are playing in a playoff-charged atmosphere. Life comes at you fast, I guess. Like I'm so excited to see how these guys handle a moment like this. Obviously, Jayden's been playing all year. Now you add Michael Penix into the mix. I think this is a really cool opportunity to see what these guys are about in like a big pressure situation.
I think the Falcons made the right decision to start Michael Penix Jr. over Kirk Cousins. I mean, he adds a different element to that Falcons offense, makes it more explosive, has a stronger arm, is more mobile, more accurate at this point from what we've seen. And he played pretty well last week. Now, granted, it was against the Giants. They are already making Cabo plans. But, that interception wasn't on him. And Kyle Pitts pretty much dropped the ball on that. And I thought he had a commanded offense. Yes, it was kind of, short, precise passes, easy reads. But he gives the Falcons a better chance to win. Do I think they're going to beat the Commanders? Probably not. The Commanders, they're still, playing for that playoff positioning. And Jayden Daniels, I mean, he has Offensive Rookie of the Year just wrapped up.
It felt like he was losing his grip on it for about a month.
Maybe a couple weeks, but he got it back.
It's over now. Yeah.
No, it's over certainly over. I mean, the way he's just galvanized that fan base. I mean, I met him for the first time at the ESPY Awards, and he told me that he was going to try to turn the narrative around with the Washington Commanders. I didn't know he was going to do that in year one. I mean, he has literally, they look like a completely different team. That fan base is rejuvenized from top down. I mean, just the way that he's helped just energize that fan base. And the defense is playing better. They're playing over their heads to me. They don't really have a lot of name brand recognition players. I mean, besides, a Bobby Wagner, but, he's older. That defense is, top 10 in the league right now and playing at a high level. And with their passing offense, he has him, McLaurin is playing well. Zach Ertz looks younger, like Zach Ertz from the Eagles. So, yeah, and to me, I do believe the Commanders win that game. It's a game that they both really need, though, because the Falcons, if they lose and the Bucs win, then they fall out of the NFC South first place. So this is a really good game with playoff implication. I just really think that the Commanders, they're kind of that team of destiny and that team that everybody's rooting for.
There's so much to like here. And yeah, let's shout them out, because you're so right. Like, there's so many guys on that defense that have played well that continue to fly under the radar. Frankie Louvu got the pick against Philly. That was phenomenal. Dorrance Armstrong and Dante Fowler, the former Cowboys that followed Dan Quinn to Washington, have both had nice seasons. Jeremy Chen's really come on for Washington over the last few weeks. It's so fun to watch, and you're so right. In the offseason, like Zach Ertz and Austin Eckler were the poster boys for this, where you're just like, Zach Ertz, Austin Eckler, and Bobby Wagner. What is this, Dan Quinn's retirement home? And like, all of these guys have been meaningful contributors to a team that they're not officially in the playoffs, but it's starting to feel like a lock. They can lock it up if they win this game. It's a ton of fun, man. And on top of that, you mentioned it, the Falcons need to win to avoid losing the South back to the Bucs.
Yeah.
If the Bucs mess around and lose on Sunday, the Falcons could win the division on Sunday night. I mean, getting a little ahead of myself, but the swings in this are wild. I think Tampa Bay plays Carolina on Sunday. That's a Carolina team that took them to overtime not that long ago. Stranger things have happened with the way Bryce Young and those guys have been playing. So.
They're flying under the radar too, and kind of credit to Bryce Young though. After he's been benched, he's developed as a quarterback, as a pocket passer. Credit to what they've been able to do too, flying under the radar, as you said.
This is the time of year we live for. There's playoff implications on both sides,
Mm-hmm.
winning in games. You can lock up seeds. So much to look forward to. And yeah, one more time for good measure, Beyonce at halftime. Like, what's not to be excited about? Tyler, this was a ton of fun, man. I appreciate you stopping by. Hope you have a Merry Christmas, and I'll talk to you soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me on. Merry Christmas.
Let's jump into the Saturday segment of the preview episode. And we do need a whole segment because the league announced in May that week 17 would feature a Saturday triple header. We didn't know the matchups until a week or two ago. But now that we're here, can I just say to the NFL league office, A++, guys. You want maximum drama with these games. If you're going to take over a Saturday, give people a reason to watch. And it is a mission accomplished here because we've got two games with very direct playoff implications, win and in games. And the third game, the nightcap, could have them depending on Thursday Night Football. It's not confusing. I'll get to it in a minute. But let's start with the early one. It is a perfect candidate for on the road. It's presented by Honda. Dreams are unstoppable. The only thing stopping the LA Chargers from claiming an AFC playoff spot are the New England Patriots, the lowly New England Patriots sitting there at 3-12. Yeah, I know Drake May's been playing pretty well. If you want to clinch a playoff spot a week ahead of time, this is a game that you should absolutely win. I love the mental image. You know, the Chargers play out here in LA. They play in an enclosed stadium, or a stadium with a roof anyway. SoFi doesn't actually have walls. That's beside the point. The LA team is going up to Foxborough to clinch a playoff spot. Maybe that sounds difficult, but no. This is Jim Harbaugh's team. Jim Harbaugh coached at Michigan forever. You think Jim Harbaugh is going to be worried about a little cold? The Chargers team doesn't play like a dome team anyway. They're going to pound the rock. They're going to control the line of scrimmage. J.K. Dobbins could be back for this game. Remember, he injured his knee against Baltimore last month. His practice window is open. There's optimism he could play. If he does, the Chargers might try to flirt with 50 carries on the ground. And if they do that, it's as simple as beating New England, and the Chargers claim a wild card. There are only 2 playoff spots left in the AFC. By beating Pittsburgh, Baltimore claimed the 5th one. So Kansas City, Buffalo, Pittsburgh, Houston, Baltimore, they're all already in. Just 2 spots left. The Chargers beat the Patriots. There's just 1 spot left for grabs. You talk about a remarkable turnaround. Winning this game would bump LA from 5-12 last year to 10-6 and into the postseason, a double-digit win season and a playoff berth. Talk about a successful year for the Chargers if they can just beat the lonely Patriots. And Dobbins or no Dobbins, I think they will. Few hours later, we could finalize the AFC playoff field with another AFC West team because just like the Chargers, a win puts the Broncos in. Now, unlike the Chargers, Denver is an underdog. Chargers are a road favorite in Foxborough. Denver is an underdog in Cincinnati. Bengals favored by 3. And B, like we talked about with Tyler Dragon earlier in the show, if Denver can't win, it sets up a hell of a dramatic Week 18 because Cincinnati is one of Denver's biggest competitors for the final playoff spot. If the Broncos lose, they got to find a way to beat Kansas City to avoid somebody else getting in. If LA loses to New England, their mulligan is a game against the Las Vegas Raiders. It is good to be a Chargers fan in a situation like this. You do not want to be Denver and open the door for either Indianapolis or Cincinnati to steal a playoff spot from you. Safe to say Sean Payton would much rather put that to rest. Just go to Cincinnati, beat the Bengals. Yes, Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase are playing phenomenal football. Still a very mistake-prone, leaky on defense Bengals team. Denver can win this game. And if Denver and LA do, we know the playoff field in the AFC. Obviously, there will still be some jostling for seeding. We still got to figure out who wins the AFC North. But we could potentially know all 7 AFC playoff teams by the time the games start on Sunday morning. In the final game on Saturday, the LA Rams, they need a little bit more help. You can't call it a true win and in, but it is possible. because their only contenders for the NFC West crown, the Seattle Seahawks, are traveling to Chicago on Thursday night. It's the game the Seahawks are favored to win, but you could conceivably lose playing outdoors in Chicago in late December. I'm not handing that to anybody. And if Seattle does lose at Soldier Field, then Saturday night's game for the Rams against the Arizona Cardinals becomes a division championship game for LA. If they win the division a week ahead of time. It doesn't even matter what happens in the season finale, which is ironic because they close the season with Seattle. Imagine if you get the right result, you win this division on Saturday night, you don't even have to worry about beating the Seahawks in the last week of the season. Obviously, I'm getting ahead of myself here. We don't even know for sure that the Rams can win the division. But the fact that it's even possible is an insane turnaround. Rams, remember, started 1-4. They were so banged up, they could barely field an offensive line. Their first meeting against Arizona was all the way back in week 2. And if you don't remember, it barely looked like NFL football. It looked like that Packers-Saints game from the other night. The Cardinals beat them 41-10. It looked like a college team beaten up on a cupcake that they scheduled at the beginning of the season. A couple weeks after that, talked about whether the Rams would consider trading Cooper Kupp, whether they would sell guys off at the deadline. Then they hit their bye week. They've been 8-2 ever since. They beat the Bills a couple of weeks ago, and they just might lock up the division title on Saturday night with a little bit of help. Winning the division a week ahead of time, winning the division period after starting 1-4, you just don't see it very often. Very impressive on the Rams' part, whether they reach the playoffs this weekend or not. Either way, got some big stakes on Saturday. And for that matter, for all my Seahawks fans, just in case I'm getting too far ahead of myself, a Seahawks win does set the stage for an NFC West title game in week 18. So really, no matter what happens, we as viewers win. 3 big games with 3 very real playoff implications. That is flex scheduling done right by the league. Congratulations to y'all. 2 more big games to dive into in week 17, and they both involve the NFC North. The game of the week right here on Fox on Sunday will be the Green Bay Packers, fresh off of clinching their playoff berth, going to face the Minnesota Vikings for the return game in that series. And then on Monday night, we wrap up the week with the Detroit Lions at the San Francisco 49ers. Not quite as juicy as maybe people thought when they booked that NFC Championship game rematch. Obviously, the 49ers will not be in the postseason this year, but still plenty on the line for the Lions. We'll get to that, but we'll start with the Sunday game, and we're going to do it with an assist from my good friend Ben Arthur of FoxSports.com. Ben, who is out here in Pacific time with me for the holidays. Hey, man, how's it going? Merry Christmas. Thanks for joining us, dude. How are you?
Doing well. Merry Christmas to you too.
So let's jump into this. I have a very open-ended question for you, and I don't specifically know the answer. It's very rare when you get a matchup between teams with double-digit wins who neither one is in possession of first place in their division. Obviously, the NFC North is psychotic this year. You've got 3 11-plus win teams all jockeying for playoff position. Green Bay at 11-4 is a third-place team, which is just wild to think about. So I'm curious, from your perspective, between these two teams, who is flying more under the radar to you? Who has more to prove in a big spot that'll obviously be very widely televised late on Sunday afternoon?
Yeah, I'd have to go with the Packers, Dave. I mean, they're third place in the NFC North. Obviously, they can't win the NFC. They can't win that division anymore. It's going to be the Lions or the Vikings, and so I think because of that, naturally, maybe they're sliding a bit under the radar. And we have to remember the Lions swept them earlier in the season in Week 4. They lost to Minnesota, and then what was it? The Packers' fourth loss of the season also came to the Eagles. So that they seem to be like that rung below kind of those heavy hitters in the NFC. And so I think for the Packers' sake, I mean, they're eager to prove that they are kind of in that Super Bowl conversation because to this point, the other three Super Bowl contenders in the NFC they've lost to. They've been kind of a step below those teams, and this is a different Packers team than the one that faced Minnesota earlier in the year. If you remember, Minnesota jumped out to a 28 to nothing lead in the first half. Before the Packers were able to kind of claw back, make it a game, it was kind of a close finish in the end. But I know from the Packers' perspective, they're probably more motivated than anyone. So I'd have to say the Packers for sure, because we all kind of know what the Vikings are at this point, but the Packers with kind of the run they've been on the last 6 weeks, going 5-1, 30 plus points in their last five straight games. I think for them on this stage, this maybe means a little bit more to them.
It is kind of wild, and you touched on it, but the Packers' 4 losses are all to teams that most people would call Super Bowl contenders. You lose the season opener to Philly down in Brazil. You get swept by Detroit, and then that Minnesota loss you just referenced. I went back and looked. If you tally up all the games they've played against teams that are mathematically alive, so throw in the Colts, who they beat without Jordan Love way back in the early part of the season. They obviously just took care of Seattle very handily a couple weeks ago. If you factor in all of those games against teams that have a shot, they're 5-4 against playoff caliber competition. But when they've gone up against real deal Super Bowl contenders, 0-4. So I do think you're right that maybe Green Bay has more to prove here. You certainly don't want to get swept by both of your division rivals, as they've already been swept by Detroit. But for some reason, I feel like the general consensus probably takes the Packers a little bit more seriously, mainly because of the brand power. We've seen Jordan Love make a playoff run already. We've seen the Green Bay Packers make the playoffs 13 out of the last 16 years. Matt LaFleur has done a great job the whole time that he's been there. I can't quantify this, but I wonder if people just trust the Packers brand a little bit more than a Vikings team that came out of nowhere this year. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not sure. But I just kind of feel like maybe people trust that G a little bit more than the Vikings.
Yeah, Dave, that's a really good point. And now that you bring that up too, I mean, we have to think about Sam Darnold too, even though it's kind of been a career resurgence for him. I think we've seen at times where he kind of has a rash of turnovers, the sack rate. I mean, a lot of the kind of passing efficiency numbers have been good for him, but the sack rate isn't kind of where you want it. And then I mentioned the turnovers too. And then, as much as this team has kind of been on the rise with Kevin O'Connell, they haven't done anything really. I mean, I think they have one playoff appearance. And that one year they got in, what was it? Was it 22? I don't remember off the top of my head.
2022.
Yep, and they got bounced in the wild card. So they haven't really done anything, right? And as you said, the Packers were just in the playoffs last year with Jordan Love. So he's kind of already been in these kinds of games. We know the run the Packers and Jordan Love went on to finish last year, and they were a game away from the NFC Championship game. So you do bring up a good point. I think just though, like in the context of this season, the Vikings have just been so dominant that it almost seems that you trust them a little bit more, just given kind of this matchup. But that's a very fair point. I mean, this is a Packers franchise that has a lot of history, and this is a young team still, but they are experienced, as we've talked about, because of their run last year. So it's going to be a fun one for sure.
For the record, I'm with you. Maybe this will bite me once we get to the postseason. I trust this Vikings formula implicitly. I mean, defense travels. Defense is something you can rely on. I know people say, turnovers and takeaways have a lot of variance, but when you can do it every single week of a season, at some point I start to trust that that's going to be reliable. And we've seen Sam Darnold follow this formula week in and week out for the entire season at this point. But it is crazy to think that the loser of this game, and honestly, maybe even the winner. I mean, the Vikings very well could have to go on the road as well, but at least the Vikings still have a chance at the number 1 seed and the division title. The loser of this game has a case as the best team in the NFC and will undoubtedly have to go on the road in the NFC playoffs. It's so wild, the win total in this division. And on the flip side of that, the Monday night game, Detroit could be heading into that game with the knowledge that if they get the right result, they lock up everything a week ahead of time. I know this probably hurts for Lions fans, but you are big Green Bay Packer fans this weekend with a chance to have the number 1 seed available to you if the Vikings lose.
Yeah, I mean, if you're the Lions, you have to be really excited about kind of this opportunity that's in front of you, despite kind of everything that's happened this year with the injuries, particularly on defense. And this is a team that could really use the extra week, right? I mean, I think in general, any team would want the first round bye, but just with the way this Lions season has gone, to maybe kind of gather themselves a bit for what they still hope can be a Super Bowl run. And this offense, man, I mean, we saw it against the Bears, and I know the Bears stink. They're the kind of that one team in the NFC North that you don't really kind of respect. But just to see what Jared Goff is still able to do, what Jahmyr Gibbs can do, even with David Montgomery not being there anymore, what Jamison Williams did. I mean, having him as your number 2 receiver is just an incredible luxury. Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Sam Laporta. I mean, we know kind of the deficiencies of this defense, and they have to blitz a lot right now, and it's been hit or miss. I mean, they're just kind of doing what they can to survive. But because of the caliber of this offense, I mean, this is one of the best offenses we've seen in a long time, in years. So I think you have to still be really encouraged if you're the Lions, and if you can lock up that first round bye. I mean, you have to kind of pat yourself on the back, and you kind of enter the playoffs in a really good situation if that kind of ends up happening, as the dominoes falling as you hope.
It is crazy to think. I'm thinking of this on the fly, but I don't think it's completely insane. The Detroit Lions are the least well-rounded of these 3 teams. Like, if you take the totality of everything, offense, defense, special teams, I think you're probably taking the Vikings and Packers over the Lions, but the strength of this Lions offense is so good that they still might be the best of the 3 and can prove it by winning the division and locking up home field throughout the playoffs if they get the right results this weekend. It is wild that even with everything they're facing on defense, especially if they get a bye in the first week of the playoffs, you like their odds to pull this off, even if maybe they're not as well-rounded as some of their counterparts.
Yeah, Dave, it's not just that like these Lions are deep. I mean, in particular on the offensive side of the ball, but it's because they're so deep in star power, right? Like David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs are both Pro Bowl running backs, right? But you lose one, but Jahmyr Gibbs is more than capable. I mean, we saw it last week, right? I mean, over 150 scrimmage yards. I mean, and then wide receiver, I mentioned Jamison Williams. I mean, he's a wide receiver 1 on probably most teams in the NFL. Sam Laporta, I know maybe he hasn't made the waves he did as a rookie. I mean, he's still a number 1 tight end. Jared Goff is playing the best ball he's ever played in his career. I think he just passed his career high for passing touchdowns. This Lions team just has so much going for it, and so much depth on the offensive side of the ball, that in a way you're almost not worried about this defense. I mean, you still have to shore up some things. As I said, you're going to have to blitz a lot if you're Aaron Glenn and that Lions defense, but you're confident that they'll be able to do just enough for the offense to kind of carry the load in what they hope is a Super Bowl run.
Obviously, I touched on it. Everybody was salivating at this being a rematch of the NFC title game right before the playoffs. That's not going to be the case. Wild stat that I wanted to make sure got in the show from my guy Albert Breer. If you go back to the year 2003, in the last 20 years, the 49ers have either reached the NFC title game, which they've done 7 times, or missed the playoffs entirely. Like, there is no in between with these guys. They are either Super Bowl bound or they're not even good enough to make the postseason. Obviously, we know already the Niners are going to finish this year with a losing record. It's a season from hell for San Francisco for a variety of reasons. I'm curious, though, because I think we know the Super Bowl hangover is such a real thing. Teams deal with it all the time. It's very hard to get back to the postseason after you lose a Super Bowl. The 49ers have dealt with so much injury and so many misfortunes this year. Do you just chalk this up as kind of those are the breaks sometimes and life doesn't always go your way? Because that's how I feel. Or do you think that there should be a higher level of accountability? Like, do the 49ers need to worry about trying to make changes? Is it fair to be dissatisfied with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch? Like, I don't really think so, but I'm curious to get other people's perspectives because this is one of the most disappointing seasons in the NFL.
Yeah, I think it's a really unique situation with the 49ers because I do, number one, like that first layer, right, is that this has been extremely disappointing with this rash of injuries, but it's also the fact that I do think we have to start thinking about a massive rebuild with this roster. And like you said, like I trust the brain trust of Shanahan and Lynch. I mean, they've been so successful for so long and have had a run that very few franchises have ever had in their history. I think their leadership is, I think they still have what they need in terms of leadership, but I do think they're at the point to where we do need to start thinking about reconstructing this roster in a major way. It's just that a lot of their injuries and their misfortunes and the disappointment this year is kind of amplified that point. But I just think with the way that the season has gone, it's made it even more obvious to me that you need to, if you're the Niners, you have to kind of reconstruct how you're doing this thing, right? And then there's obviously the whole Brock Purdy situation looming, right? Are they going to pay him? Are they not going to pay him? Are they going to tag him? Franchise tag, whatever or not fifth year option, but
they wish they had the 5th year option.
Yeah, they wish, right? Right? Like if he was a first round pick. But yeah, the Niners are in a very, very interesting situation. So I do think Purdy is a guy they're confident in. I know a lot of people haven't seen him maybe kind of carry the team on his back the way that some people kind of hoped he was capable of, even with all the talent that he's had around him since he got into the league. But I do think you do have to give him somewhat of a pass just because of how bad it's been. And so I think if you can kind of reconstruct the team around him and kind of see where it goes from there, you kind of move forward in that direction. So this is going to be a big offseason for them to kind of figure out, I think, what exactly they have in Purdy.
This team feels like a Rorschach test to me, like where you read the ink blots, because you could easily sell me on the idea that this is a loaded roster that has made 3 consecutive runs to the NFC title game. They had a terrible run of injury luck, and we don't need to do all that much. And I think that is completely justifiable. I think it's also justifiable to say, look at all these big contracts. Look at all these veteran players. Look at all of these guys who are beginning to regress, whether you want to talk about Debo or just talk about guys' injury histories. And maybe you do need to do something bold, maybe not to get over the hump in 2025, but to put yourself in the best position moving forward over the next 3 to 5 years. So I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers try to run it back. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do some really aggressive, really bold maneuvering. Very curious to see which route they kind of land on as we move forward. But I think really the lesson is I never thought we would be talking this way about San Francisco at Christmas. And clearly neither did the schedule makers by putting this game in week 17.
Thanks.
It's just been that kind of year. We'll see how it goes. Again, the Lions, depending on the result, if the Vikings lose Sunday, the Lions can lock up the number 1 seed on Monday night. So that's the big thing to watch with this one. Should be really entertaining in both matchups. Ben, always appreciate it, man. I hope you have a Merry Christmas, and I'll chat with you real soon.
You as well, Dave. Thank you.
All right, let's hurry up and get y'all into your Christmas weekend with one last bit of the show. You know the drill. Don't have time for a deep dive on every matchup in the NFL. And in week 17, some of these matchups aren't worth deep dives, but we are nothing if not thorough. Even on the holiday week, we are going to hit on every single matchup. We're going to do it quickly with what we call our hurry up offense. My producers are going to give me 2 minutes on the clock, and I'm going to run through the 7 games we haven't hit on, give you something interesting to mull over as we wait for these games to kick off, get you into the holiday spirit. I wish I could say these were festive stats. Some of them are a little bleak because, like I said, there's some bleak matchups when you get to this point in the year. All right, I digress. I see the timer on the screen. We got 2 minutes to run you through the rest of these. Let's do it. Let's start with Carolina at Tampa Bay. The Bucs need this game, like we said, to stay alive in the NFC South race. But watch out. Not only did Carolina take this team to overtime recently, Bryce Young, with a touchdown pass in 8 straight games, has the longest such streak for a Panthers quarterback since Cam Newton all the way back in 2018. He's been impressive. Jets at Bills. Bills will know by Sunday whether they're still in the mix for the 1 seed, but a win would wrap up an undefeated season at home. They have the best home win streak in the NFL at 10 games. So a little extra motivation there. Seahawks at Bears at 4-11. The Bears have the second worst record in NFL history for a team that started 4-2. If they don't find a way to win one of these last 2 games, they will pass the 2011 Bucs for the worst such record, from 4-2 to 4-13. Yikes. Raiders at Saints. Let's just check in on Brock Bowers like we like to do. Brock Bowers needs 10 yards to break Mike Ditka's rookie record for receiving yards by a tight end in a single season. He already broke the record for catches. I'm going to guess he can get 10 more. Dolphins at Browns. Cleveland has allowed 63 sacks this season. It's just the second time they've ever given up 60-plus sacks, going all the way back to 1963. The Dolphins have 10 sacks in their last 3 games, just FYI. Colts at Giants. Let's do the Colts indicator test. Colts are 6-1 against teams below 500 and 1-7 against teams above 500. Giants need a win to avoid going winless at home. I don't think they're going to get it against Indianapolis. Titans at Jags. Whew. Barn burner in Jacksonville. Tennessee has committed 32 turnovers this year. They have multiple giveaways in an absurd 9 games. Ironically, one of the games they didn't turn the ball over in was against Jacksonville, which they still managed to lose. I'm guessing they will turn it over on Sunday, and I'm guessing they will lose. And that does it for the Week 17 preview. We are on an extended break. We recorded this early, so you would have it in your stocking for Christmas. Hope you find the time to dive into all the matchups, get yourself ready for Week 17, Christmas games, Saturday games, and a full slate on Sunday. So much to look forward to. Really looking forward to it, y'all. I hope you are having a happy, healthy holiday season. And as always, we will be back on the other side of the weekend to take you through all of the action on Monday. Your Spotify feed, your Apple Podcast feed. We will be there to break down what happened at Christmas, what happened over the weekend, who's into the playoffs, who's on the bubble, all that good stuff. We'll be here for you. I appreciate it so much. Like I said, happy holidays. Really appreciate y'all listening. We will talk to you real soon. Thanks.